Hey everybody, today we have Meghann Rudolph in our podcast, and we are really excited about having a conversation about what it's like to be a Scrum Master in a totally remote world. We have topics like retrospectives, improving team culture. We're going to talk about courage and vulnerability. But to talk a little bit more about Meghann, she's been a Scrum Master for a while, worked with several different companies. And on top of being a Scrum Master, she's a content creator. She creates some amazing content on LinkedIn, and she's also an entrepreneur and a coach. So we are really excited to have her on the show today. Meghann, we'll just kind of start with the first question. How have you been in 2020? Kind of give us what you've been up to.
It's a loaded question, Vivek. Well, thanks so much for having me on your podcast. It's an honor. It's a privilege. I've learned so much of what we're going to talk about from you. And wow, yeah, this year, it's been a crazy one. And if I were to say otherwise, then I probably would be in denial.
Yes. So how has your role shifted? Because of the totally suddenly remote teams. Like, how have your role evolved as a Scrum Master?
Yeah, oh my gosh, my role has evolved so much, and I feel like the biggest thing that I've really had to focus on this last year is being empathic, really seeing my team and each individual member as an actual human being.
Yes.
Because they are.
Yes. Definitely. Let's kind of go into maybe a little bit more of like what kind of team is it? What are they producing? Something high level, and would love to kind of hear what are some impediments, not like technical impediments. What are some challenges that you faced this year?
Yeah, so great question. Thank you.
Yes.
The teams that I work with, I've got two teams that I facilitate that I'm Scrum Master for, and a handful of other individuals outside of that team that I coach and mentor. But within those two teams, we in Comcast, we do a lot of logging and analytics.
Yeah.
We are huge in building those infrastructures out and doing a lot of hardware deployments kind of stuff. We've got an actual platform that we've been working on building for the entirety of Comcast to use. And it's been a great team to be a part of. And, in the last year, we definitely have had some shifts. We're not in person anymore.
Yeah.
All of us are at home.
Yeah.
Previously to that, we only had one remote guy.
Yeah.
All of us were in person. So for some of us, some challenges. Definitely have some more extroverted individuals on the team who we've had to come up with some, creative ways to get them involved and for them to still feel energized and excited. And still feel like they're getting the love that they need as a person, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for extroverts, like they're probably going crazy because after the pandemic, me being an extrovert, I didn't do this. Like it was really weird for me. Like I was like, okay, what's happening? I cannot go out there, hug people. I cannot talk to people. Like, it's probably been tough for the extroverts.
It has been.
And I wonder how has the introverts thrived in this?
They love it. They're like, can we do this for the entirety of our life?
And I'm curious, like, what is like? Is everybody like distributed? Are everybody here in the U.S. or do you have remote, like offshore?
Yeah, everyone we've got are most of our guys are here in the Denver area, and then we've got one guy that's actually out in the Philadelphia area.
Okay, all right. So this is all at least in same time zones.
Yeah,
almost same time zone.
Close.
So Meghann, let's talk about setting the team culture. Like as a Scrum Master of a team in this pandemic world, how have you set the culture of the team to be more courageous and vulnerable?
A lot of it has come from my own vulnerability. I think so often if we expect something out of another person, we better expect that ourselves is willing to do that same thing as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of what I've done just this last year is a lot more personal check-ins with people, whether, it's in a retrospective, sprint planning, really gauging where people's emotions are at. And not only that, when we're doing that I'm checking in and I'm sharing fully what my emotions are for that state, for that day.
Yeah.
And I think just in general, when we lead by example, it creates magic. It really does. It's because, instead of having to try to tell someone to do something, they see it exemplified.
Yeah.
And it's sad when leaders don't do that and they wonder why the heck they don't have an open, vulnerable culture. Maybe their team is really burnt out. They don't understand why they're not delivering. Well, how much have you actually focused on making sure that human being feels seen, that they feel heard, and that, if someone brings something up that's tough, that you're actually acknowledging that, wow, that must have been really tough for you to share. I really appreciate your vulnerability and calling that out and following up with them and actually seeing them as another person. Yeah. The golden rule: treat everyone the way that you want to be treated.
Yeah, definitely. And, like the culture in some companies, not everywhere, but in the culture that we set is like leadership has goals. And, sometimes, all the people who are doing the work, knowledge workers, are kind of seen like they are the means to the goals versus like they are people, right? So that's definitely very important to, recognize them as people. And, a lot of the companies, a lot of the work that we do, a lot of the work that knowledge workers do, it is very, has a lot of risk. It needs it needs innovation. It also needs a certain amount of risk taking. And in situations like that, if we don't have, if people are not feeling comfortable to be vulnerable and courageous, that kind of work you cannot expect out, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about vulnerability. So how does that show up in whenever you're setting up team working agreements or even in the retrospectives? How have you used it?
Yeah, I mean it all goes back to showcasing it myself. So if I'm setting up, a retrospective where I want that to be a sacred space for people to feel safe, for people to feel supported. I'll be sure that I come to the table with some things that maybe aren't so easy to share of, hey, like this one day I facilitated this ceremony and you all might have not known, but you might have felt my vibes, but this is what I was feeling on that day. Right. And this is what I'm going to do differently next time. I'll be open about it so y'all know. Yeah. So I think just in general, being prepared, it's a huge thing. That's been a game changer for me, is actually taking the time instead of just showing up to a ceremony and being like, okay, I'm a Scrum Master. I know what the heck I'm doing. Yeah. I'm going to rock this. Yeah. Instead of just going in with so much ego, really, into a retrospective or whatever ceremony that I'm expecting them to, I want them to be vulnerable in, that I'm actually taking the time to thoughtfully think about, what are my intentions with this? What do I want to gain out of this? What do I want them to gain out of this? What do they want to get out of this? And just being really intentional with the way that I ultimately am setting up whatever kind of conversation that I'm having with the team.
Yeah, I love that. So, what you're saying is you're actually caring. So, like, the preparation isn't care, like, who has gone through what, because you're paying attention to, what's happening with the team members throughout the week, right? So this is an opportunity where you're really thinking about it and you're really thinking about them. And I also love what you talked about, setting intention. A lot of the times we just show up, right? And
I've done it, guilty many times.
Guilty too. So like that's something that I actually have started doing whenever I go into the team planning meetings or demo meetings that I lead. Kind of, okay, what is the intention? How are the team members feeling? What have they gone through to deliver this product, right? Right. And the other thing is in retros, some of the things that I've done is actually knowing what they've gone through, like really thinking through, okay, these are some of the things that are going to come up, and some of these are actually difficult, right? Yeah. So how am I gonna create space for this difficult conversation. And like you
Right.
said, setting with examples, sharing something that that you screwed up or you made a mistake,
You're right.
actually helps other people and the team members to like emulate that behavior. Oh, like Vivek did that. Now it's safe for me to share that too.
Right.
So I really love that piece.
Yeah, thank you. And I think another piece of it is not only being willing to be vulnerable, but to also be willing to be supportive.
Yes.
You know, someone can be vulnerable and share something so hard that's going on in their life, or maybe why I don't know, maybe why they weren't a part of a deployment, or reason that they had to step out. And so often I feel like even myself, I've caught myself where I've just kind of brushed what they said under the rug, moved on to the next topic without actually validating the emotion and the amount of courage it took for them to show up. Because when we don't help them feel heard, they don't want to share again. Like, how can I expect them to want to come to this space in the future if they don't feel like what they're going to share is going to be valued? Yeah,
I love that. And actually providing support, and like Brene Brown talks about it, right? Trust is
awesome.
Trust is not built in like these big moments. It's built in these small moments when you're having a conversation and you take time to like support and then maybe follow up. That's where they trust you, and then in the future, like that's where there's that bond and connection where they feel comfortable sharing vulnerable stuff.
Right.
And so like let's just talk a little bit more about like what are some different ways to support people. Let's say once they have shared some things with you, what are some things that you've done to support them?
One thing that I've done just in my own time to help prepare myself for these kinds of situations is actually sitting there and envisioning this kind of situation to happen and how I want to respond to it.
Right.
It's amazing. Just that small exercise of even thinking about this podcast. Like, initially, like, my gut reaction is like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous, I'm so scared. But like, that's not the outcome that I want out of it. So by actually sitting with myself and saying, okay, like my intention with this is to be present with Vivek, to share from my heart, to share value to the people that are listening.
Yes.
That itself helped me to be able to show up authentically right here in this moment. So I think it goes part of preparation as well.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, setting intention is great because whenever you are taking time, like I actually set intentions too. The afternoons are pretty hectic, and I was running around it, but I knew like this conversation is happening, and I was really looking forward to it. So I can say, okay, like I can be a little bit all over the place, or the other way to be is like really, okay, this is really important. I'm really excited about this. So I actually took some time to like settle in and prepare, which I've already prepared, but just gonna go over. And that's setting that intention and giving yourself a little bit of time, and also recognizing, okay, it's been a little bit crazy day, you just need some time to like really process this. That was helpful. So great point on intentions.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, there's other things to do as well. I mean, when someone shares something hard of something that they went through, they want to know that what they shared is that they're reminded that their worth.
Right.
Because at that point, they usually probably don't feel a whole lot of worth. I know with me, if I'm sharing like, oh gosh, like I'm feeling so sad about so-and-so or whatever happened, I'm feeling pretty low and feeling in a dark space. And sometimes they just need a light shined on to remind them, like, hey, we appreciate you. And so that's one thing that I always make sure to do is whenever I recognize, when I hear someone share a feeling, that I'm sure to recognize that feeling in my response.
Right.
Of like, oh, wow, that sucks. Like, that sucks that you went through that.
Right.
Or that's a real big bummer that you felt so sad. I've gone through something, feel, felt, found.
Yes.
I've used that so many times. It's a sales tactic, but it's such an important thing because that's what people want. They want to know that,
building
like,
empathy.
Exactly, it's empathy of that I'm here, I'm sitting with you with these emotions, and I want to understand them because I care about you. That's what people want to know, is that they actually are cared for.
So you're saying that, obviously you can sometimes, people can feel it, but they don't actually verbalize it. So you're saying that verbalizing that actually builds trust,
100%,
and sets the other part at ease, and the other thing that I've done is I've just kind of checked in with people in the future.
Yeah.
So that's something that I've done. When we've had a vulnerable communication with somebody where it's difficult, you want to check in. So
put it in the back pocket and save it for later.
Yeah,
for sure.
And one of the things that I've done is I've really actually appreciated, because I know it's how hard it is to share something difficult, right? So that's around vulnerability, and what does it look like when one of the Scrum values is actually courage, right? So let's talk a little bit more about the relationship between vulnerability and courage. What are some ways to kind of bring it all back together? How do teams how does vulnerability in the team members kind of relate to courage? Everybody being more courageous, having courageous conversations.
I mean, I feel like it takes courage to be vulnerable.
Yes.
And regarding to how the team, I mean, would you be able to re-explain that question so I have better understanding?
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is, one of the Scrum values, and team members, everybody wants people to be courageous.
Okay.
Vulnerability is such a foundational piece to everybody showing up courage. So how do you have conversations like that? How do you
influence people to be courageous?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I mean, there are so many things that we can do as leaders to help people feel like they've got the space to be courageous. I feel like the more that I've helped the team understand that whatever we're working on, whatever product that we're working to deliver, that it's a team effort. We're all together.
Yeah.
And that when one man goes down, we all go down.
Yeah.
And that if we don't know that one man goes down, then it's really confusing on why we went down.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
so I feel like the more that I've just brought up conversations like that, the more that I've talked to them about it's about progress. It's not about perfection.
Right.
The more that they've been able to step up to the plate and say, "Hey, I messed up," or "Hey, I'm going through this. I need help."
Yes.
The more that team leaders in our teams have been able to rise up, and it's like this domino effect. Once one person does it, then the other person is like, "Whoa, I can do this too."
Yeah.
And then other people are like, "Whoa, I can do this as well." Like, I'm not gonna get fired for speaking my truth.
Yeah.
Is really powerful.
Yeah. So creating safety. Meghann, we talked about courage, vulnerability, we talked about empathy, emotional intelligence. So one place for a Scrum Master where we use a lot of this is in a retrospective. So let's talk a little bit more about retrospective and your mindset behind retros.
Yeah, I mean, retro is the place to flex all of those muscles. It's really an opportunity for the team to come together and talk about what do we need to improve in our processes? How can we make this situation that we're living right now better?
Yes.
And so that's the mindset that I really go into, is how can I facilitate a discussion around what's been happening and, coming to the table ready, prepared with points that I feel like maybe I need to grow in, or maybe things that I noticed that maybe I'm not 100% sure what was going on, and I come in more with a curious mind of, what happened during this time in the sprint, all those kinds of things. So that's the main focus that I have going into a retrospective.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because as a Scrum Master, you're also you're a facilitator where you're supposed to be neutral and you're supposed to let the teams come up with the answers. But as a Scrum Master, you're also you're also part of the team. You're responsible for the delivery, right? Even though you're not coding. So in that situation, how do you play into the retro, and then how do you separate just the pure facilitation and coaching that happens in the retro?
Those are great questions, and they're definitely separate. So I'll take one at the head first.
Yeah.
The very first thing that I do within a retrospective is just setting the stage of what we feel like, what our focus is going to be, and letting people know, again, this is a safe space, and there's so many different ways that you can go about it. I'm always a big fan of a power statement. I'm always a big fan of, there's so many check-in activities that you can do. One of my favorite ones from this past year was, hey, pick a song. I've got my Spotify up. Let me know if you could describe your sprint in one song, what song would it be?
Yeah.
That tells a lot about what the rest of the retrospective is going to go like.
That's a really fun way. I wonder what kind of songs came in. Do you remember?
There was some really happy songs. There were some really dark songs.
Yes.
All over the map. But the beautiful thing is it not only lets me know what the discussion is going to be like moving forward, like we were talking about earlier, though. Now I've got a good checkpoint for how I can follow up with that person.
And that's a great way to set the stage for the rest of the retrospective conversation. So, we've set the space. Everybody's feeling safe and included, and they have the right heart set. We're just here we're not here to like blame on each other. We're really here to like look at how the last sprint went and how can we improve, right? So then, what are some different ways, different techniques that you use to like kind of gather data, like in terms of what went well, what didn't go well?
Yeah, well, pre-COVID, there were so many sticky notes that I had everywhere to gather data where, I'd have everyone have their own sticky notepad and they'd be able to write down all the things that they just needed to get off their chest of, this is how I felt. This is what happened. This was a challenge. Oh, this really pissed me off. Or, oh, yes, this felt so good when I figured this out. All those kinds of things.
Yes.
And then they could go put it up on the wall and, we'd be able to step back and analyze it and, come up with some solutions after that. But obviously, everything is remote now. It's a little bit different than that.
Yes.
So I've had to, pull some tricks out of my sleeve.
Yes.
There's so many resources like Fun Retro that you can do. You can do Scatterspoke. I've even done a Google, I don't believe it's Google, I think it's Microsoft. They've got like a shareable spreadsheet that you can share with everyone and everyone can type at the same time. There's whiteboards, virtual whiteboards that you can use depending on what video software you're using. Oop, hello, microphone. And there's Slack or whatever kind of communication device software that you use, and it's just a matter of there's all these great resources, but how are you actually using them? And that's where the planning is just so vital because I can really help them feel like they're a part of this discussion by having discussion points to lead them in the right direction for them to use whatever tool we wind up going with. So.
You mentioned Scatterspoke. They actually have multiple different ways to gather data, like what went well, what didn't go well, action items, MATSAT, glad. I think they even have a the sailboat retro technique.
They do.
They can do that. So great. So we do that. So once they have come up with the data, right? These are the things that we've had challenging. These are the impediments. Like, what's the process of like facilitating once you have these items? How do you go about gathering some insights from these things?
Well, I mean, also depending on what tool you're using, like if you're using Fun Retro, people can vote.
Yes.
And so then you're like, okay, I know that these are the main things that sounds like we want to talk about. And that's a great way to decide.
Yeah.
Also, to just go through each individual thing and say, all right, like, let's unpack this.
Yeah,
let's tell us more, what was going on.
Yeah.
If they feel comfortable. And that's the thing that I always make sure is everything that I do in a retrospective is 100% anonymous. Yes. No one knows who's saying what.
Yes.
Which is the most beautiful thing, because then again, people feel like, okay, I can speak up, I can share my truth if I choose so. And then if we want to have a discussion about it, I'll give them the option, like, hey, if you want to own up and let everyone know that this is what you said, let us know. Yeah. And if you don't, then that's okay. And the beautiful thing is once you create a vulnerable, safe, empathic culture is 99% of the time they'll say, yeah, that was me who said that, and this is what was going on.
Yes. And that's a great way to create shared understanding on what's happening, and then that leads to conversation that really ends up helping the team moving forward. So that's great. Yeah, that's those are great tools and techniques to those great ways to gather insights. And then once you wrap up once you have the insight, right, you might have multiple different things. How do you go about kind of deciding on what to do and what retro items to put on your next sprint backlog? What are some things that you've done to?
Yeah, a lot of it comes through the discussion where we will, reflect on maybe the not so good feelings or the good feelings, whatever they are. Yeah. And then it's amazing because once we put those emotions out there, once we validate that that's the truth, amazingly, naturally comes solutions. Yes. And what winds up happening with that is by the end of the discussion, you can usually tell which items were more popular based on the enthusiasm people had, based on the amount of people who actually joined in on talking about that data that we gathered. Yeah. That sometimes, I can recommend, hey, here's what I think are some of the most important things, but I could be completely wrong, and you're more than welcome to call me out on that. Yeah. What do y'all think? Yeah. And getting all of their feedback on what they think is most important, whether they're verbalizing it, whether it's like through thumbs up, thumbs down, activities, whether it's through them, sending me a Slack message while we're talking through it. But also, ultimately, I want to help the team get to a consensus together on what is going to be most important and what is highest priority for us to actually implement next sprint. Yeah.
And then you're doing through okay, you're listing out action items and you're having people vote, okay, are we really committing to this, and maybe limiting that to maybe one or two items.
Right. And some of the things are things that we can collectively work on as a team to improve. Yeah. But sometimes there is ownership that needs to be taken. Maybe there's something that, maybe there's a conversation that I need to have with like a product owner that I need to own, and that the team knows that, okay, Megan's going to do this, like we know how to support her through this, and we can hold her accountable to it. So
that's amazing. And then the last part is closing out the retrospective. So what are some effective ways that you've used to close out the retrospective?
Yeah. Well, I think just in general, one thing that I always am doing in whatever meeting or ceremony that I'm in is I'm thanking people for their time. I'm letting them know that I appreciate them. I'm letting them know that this was really valuable to me, and I'm listing out the reasons why. And then I want to know if they feel the same way. Did they get the return on investment that they were hoping to gain from that time together? And there's so many checkout activities that you can do with teams. I've had people send me an emoji face on how it went, and if it's a sad face or a cry face, I will follow up with them and talk about it. And if it's a happy face, it's like, okay, awesome. What did you like about it so that I can implement this? And So I feel like in general, my whole premise is gaining meaning on it of what was valuable to them and what wasn't valuable to them.
Yeah.
And am I willing to put my ego aside to take in that feedback so I can do it differently the next time. So I mean, there's so many resources online that people can go to figure out check-in and check-out activities to bring meaning to the beginning of the ceremony as well as the end.
So that's kind of like we're wrapping up the retrospectives, with the 5 stages. And then you said you would actually follow up with people after, and and in conversation with you, you're really big into like building personal relationship with the team members. So a lot of our audience is aspiring Scrum Masters or Scrum Masters already. Why is it important to build those personal relationships with the team members?
If people don't know you care, they won't care.
Yes. And what are some ways that you actually build this relationship, especially going into a new team? What are some ways that you can build a relationship with developers, team members? I mean, it definitely looks different now that we are remote versus in person. In person, I'd be able to go on like a one-on-one walk with someone or, be able to meet them in the kitchen and eat a snack with them during break times or walking past their desk. All these small interactions that we have with people, they really do add up over time. And the amazing thing is, if you are a mindful person, if you're intentionally remembering those times with those people, you can bounce back, hey, how did things go with your daughter at her soccer game, or what wound up happening after that, or whatever it might be. So even though that's the case, it's really not actually that different being online. It's just, it looks different because it's not in person. And same kind of things as following up with people on one-on-one conversations, or if someone's dog is barking in the background, like acknowledging that that's really cool, or that they're great security guards. I think there's the more that people are acknowledged in whatever is happening in their life, and that they know that you're actually listening to them, makes a huge difference. Yes. No, that's amazing. Meghann, one thing that we had talked about is, you don't necessarily come from coding background, and this is actually a lot of question that our audience has, is like, okay, as a non-technical Scrum Master, how do you navigate things, and how has that played for you, coming from non-coding background, non-technical background? I mean, the most coding that I ever did in my day was on MySpace. For anyone out there, you get me, putting up your top songs and your skins and totally making I mean, I used to spend hours doing that, but that's like all of the background of coding that I have. And honestly, I was copying and pasting from Google, so I don't think that qualifies. I mean, I grew up mostly with a retail background. I've done a lot of customer service in multiple different industries. I've done some business analyst work. Wasn't a technical business analyst. So I've really had to work on this area of not being intimidating and realizing we all have our own strengths. We all have our own skill sets that we bring to the table, and I've just really worked on leaning into those versus focusing on what I don't have. And what that's allowed me to do is, it's one, brought to fruition more of a growth mindset that, hey, if I feel challenged with, teams talking about Java, teams talking about loopback, teams talking about UI, API, all these new things that are going on, talking about CI/CD pipeline, all these things that I'm like, what the heck is going on? But it's amazing when you have that mindset of, okay, I see a challenge, instead of running away from it, of actually being like, okay, I don't know this. I'm an imperfect human being, but I'm willing to learn. And by actually vocalizing that with my team, with the product owners that I've worked with, of,
hey, I don't understand this, but I'm willing to do what I need to do to understand this, or what piece of this do I need to understand? All those kinds of things.
Yes.
And having open conversations about where my head's at and what's making me feel anxious, what's making me feel nervous. Again, all back to vulnerability, really.
Yes. So building allies by actually, asking, telling, product folks, QA folks or developers, and asking them, hey, like, I don't understand this stuff.
Exactly.
I need to learn. So that's great, instead of like feeling like an imposter and like not communicating and like trying to hide it. So that's you took a outward approach and just like
owned
allies.
it. Owned it.
So that's amazing.
I think a lot of people are scared to say like, oh, I don't have that experience, but I feel like the more that we can just lay it all on the table, for me at least, it's worked in my favor.
And then, obviously based on, our conversations about, different things, you've tapped into your people side and your emotional intelligence and team building and that side, and you've really thrived in the coaching side of things. So
Thank you.
That's amazing. Let's go into conflict.
Yes.
What's your relationship with conflict? How do you view conflict first?
Okay, so to keep it straight, like I grew up with divorced parents. I grew up in a state of mind where I always needed to protect myself and speak up for myself because I felt like no one else would do it for me. There's a lot of subconscious conditioning that I've had to unravel from so many things that have happened throughout my life. And so my relationship with conflict has definitely strengthened, and it has not been easy.
Right.
Because it's been a lot of gut checks in the mirror of like, why am I responding this way? Why am I raising my voice at someone who is mad at me? Like, maybe I should hear them out. Like, in my heart, I want to hear them out and understand, like, what was it that made you... I mean, I don't think that we can make anyone feel a certain way. That's another conversation in itself. But, just really being able to understand myself and how I personally feel around conflict, because over the years when conflict has arisen, when maybe there was something I did wrong, I didn't like it. Like, I would get really defensive and fight or flight would go up, and there was no coming down until I got every word out that I wanted, even if it meant hurting the other person back.
Yes. That's amazing that you have the self-awareness. A lot of people, that's where it starts from, right? Like having self-awareness that, these are the triggers, this is something that can create a conflict and an unpleasant state where I lose all the options on my aspirational self, on how I become, right? How I want to be. So that's great. We'll start with self-awareness. Okay, following up on that, what else have you done to
to help improve in that area?
Exactly.
So flip side of that, I don't feel like I get triggered from conflict very much anymore. Yes, I'm a human being and it affects me, but at least I know that I have control. And I think the biggest thing was just learning the difference between reacting and responding. If someone says something harsh and I feel attacked, it used to be like, all right, let's go. I'm going to get back at you.
Yes.
Now it's like, if someone says that to me, then instead of going like that, it's like, take a deep breath.
Yes.
Okay, they're sharing something that's really emotional with me right now.
Yes.
And that was probably hard for them.
Yes.
And if I was in their position, what would I want?
Yes.
And actually living and putting myself into their shoes. And it's, of course, easier said than done.
Right.
And it's still a work in progress, obviously.
That's an amazing way to restructure, like, the anger that you might have, right? Like, just taking and using empathy and just saying, okay, well, if they were in my shoes, like, like how would they feel, and then like, feeling what they feel, and then letting that inform how you're going to show up for them. So that's amazing.
Thank you. I mean, a lot of it has come from self-reflection.
Yes.
If I responded in a way or reacted in a way where I didn't like, or that I did like, we expect these people that we're working with to do these retrospectives with us, every other week.
Right.
But how often are we doing it with ourselves?
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah.
It has made a huge difference, and it hasn't been the most beautiful thing looking at what's ugly maybe about the way I approached a situation versus what's beautiful, but that's how we learn. And I feel like people who are in this industry, they're learners, and if they aren't, then it's kind of confusing why you're in maybe an agile role, but it's the truth. I mean, I think agility is all about being willing to grow, being willing to figure it out, being willing to take challenges by the horns and to overcome them. And so if we're teaching that to the team, then I feel like it's really important to teach that with ourselves so that we can empower the team even more.
That's beautiful, Meghann. Yep,
Thank you.
That's an amazing mindset. And I think more Scrum Masters would be successful if they actually took that mindset and growth mindset. So that's amazing. So we talked about our triggers and how we respond to conflict. And as Scrum Masters, most of the times you're actually brought in, and there are team challenges. There's like dynamics, and there's conflict within the team. And you also have to show up as a facilitator. So how have you approached the facilitation side of the conflict when there is two people or multiple people who are having a conflict?
Yeah, well, I've got a great story, and it's a good reflection opportunity for me because I'd probably do it differently this time. But that's the amazing thing about life is continuously are able to learn and grow and get better. And if we didn't have these kinds of situations, then we wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was about a year ago, must have been about 5 developers with myself, a product owner, as well as a program person in a circle table. We were sitting on with each other and we were discussing we want to rip out the API that we've got and we want to put in a new one. And that itself was a really hard conversation because a lot of people have different ideas on how they want to approach it. A lot of people, some people have been on the team longer. They might feel a little bit more emotionally attached to what's currently there, or they might have viewpoints if they're, not to say that age is a thing, but if they've been a developer for a longer period of time, they might have strong opinions of this is the way that it needs to be done. And that's what happened is there were, about 3 of us just sitting there watching these 2 men, grown men, go at it. And, it got to the point where voices were getting really high. And, at first my mindset was like, okay, let's just kind of see where this goes. This is really good. This is healthy that they're feeling, the way I saw it, that they're feeling comfortable to talk like this with each other instead of elephant in the room and just not addressing it. They were there addressing it. And I just let it happen. And it got to a point though where I started feeling uncomfortable, and I let them know how I was feeling, and I said, okay, it sounds like things are a little heated, and they were like, no, it's okay. This is what's going to help us get to the solution. And so I said, okay, if you're able to get to a solution, and if you're optimistic about that, and if everyone else in this room feels comfortable with that, then yes, let's do it. And so they did it, and they got to a solution. Feelings were definitely probably hurt, even though they said that they weren't. But, as someone who is mindful of these things and, especially with the way that it made me feel, like my heart was beating out of my chest because I'm a naturally empathic person. And when someone's going through trial and tribulation, I feel their nervous system on me. And I'm like, whoa, what's happening to me? Even though I'm sitting here, really calmly, my heart rate should not be this high, But, I think just in general with conflicts, it's a matter of addressing that it's happening, addressing that people feel comfortable that it's happening. And if people don't, then let's take some time to simmer down and have a civil adult conversation about it.
Mm-hmm. And you've obviously grown a lot this last year, and we actually took a class together.
We did. Nice.
And we actually talked about conflict and facilitation and coaching and holding space for folks. So how would you have dealt with that conflict now?
I don't know that I would have let it go as far as it did.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at one point there was a swear word that was dropped, and that's okay. I mean, I'm a accepting person. I swear myself, but at that point, when there's blame, when there's shame, when there's guilt being put out there, to me that's unacceptable. And looking back at it, that's what was happening, is they were making each other feel bad about the ideas that they had. And they weren't necessarily wanting to understand each other because they both had their own prerogative, right?
Yeah.
So if I were to go back to that situation, I would have stood up.
Yeah.
I would have taken and owned that space, and I would have said something along the lines of, hey, I see that this is happening. This is how it's being portrayed. And, either asking them back, like, what kind of solutions do y'all have? And then going from there and making some potential recommendations, or just bringing up some of my own recommendations of, like, hey, in my experience, like, when both people are heated, sometimes it is a little bit more challenging to get to a solution. So why don't we all just, like, peacefully say that, like, we're gonna put a pause on this chapter for today, and let's come back to this, though, because this is really healthy. I really appreciate that y'all are doing this, and that you feel comfortable to have these kinds of tough conversations. But it would make me feel more comfortable, and I'm sure that the people in the room would feel more comfortable if we were able to have a lower volume conversation with no swearing.
Yeah, and then just like, hearing each other out, where at that point there would be no reason for yelling so much, right?
Right, or interrupting. That's a big thing as well.
Yeah. And then, obviously, whenever you're in conflict, it's hard, right? Once you're hurt, like...
It's like all the way up. It's like, this is the only thing going on in life.
So, Meghann, you and I actually are doing some reading and exploring this body of work called nonviolent communication.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you, how do you use this technique or body of work in your interpersonal relationships?
It has been life-changing using this communication style. I think it's more than a style, though. It's really a mindset on how you want to approach your relationships and how you want to help people feel empowered to share whatever it is that they need to share. For me, I've practiced a lot of this in my personal relationship with my significant other, and asking him straight up, if he's coming out of his office and he's got, a kind of blank look on his face, and he starts talking to me, and maybe I'm in the middle of something, and I look up and, he's expecting something from me, that's my opportunity to ask him, like, how are you feeling right now? What's going on? Like, what's the bottom line of what you're talking about? Yeah. So one, I can mentally prepare myself for what that conversation is going to look like, but then also to segue in, what do you need from me in order to support you through this? Yeah. And, it could be, oh, I just need you to listen, or, oh, I really need advice right now. There's so many opportunities for us to share that. But it's challenging. I feel like the book that we're going through right now talks about sharing instead of feelings, sharing like opinions of what do I need, and asking it of like, you need to do this for me, instead of actually saying the feeling that we need in that moment, which I'd be curious to debunk on what your thought process is by listening and reading through that stuff.
Yeah. So for me, it's a lot of all of the conflict actually and conflict and unfulfillment, like any distress that comes from unfulfilled needs. So if we can kind of bring that body of work to our consciousness and really start thinking about how can we communicate our needs and how can we ask for other person's needs, it actually significantly improves whatever the situation is. Because a lot of the times, for example, like let's say you and I were friends and we've not been keeping in touch. What you might really be needing is like a reassurance that, hey, this friendship is going to work out.
Like, hello, I still care about you.
Yes. But sometimes, a lot of the times, because we're not trained in this, you might, or I might come to you if I was that person who was feeling ignored. I might come to you and say, Meghann, you don't keep up anymore, or like you become vague, or like you don't
what
care
does
about
that
me.
even mean,
Yes. So what I really need is like I need like reassurance that the friendship is gonna be there, or if there's anything there that has changed, right? I just want reassurance, but instead a lot of the time we just kind of throw out a judgment and we make it hard for the other party to provide empathy, which is something that I need, right? So that's where one part is like recognizing your needs, and instead of like judging, asking, hey, this is what I need from you, and then also if you're in the other person's shoes, realizing that that person might really not be judging you, that person just really needs a little bit more empathy, and kind of like restructuring things to like, okay, well, if you value, I know you're upset and I've not kept in touch, what can I do to kind of, what do we need to do to kind of make it better, and then provide a little bit more empathy so then things can turn around. That's one piece, and the other one is around actually making requests, getting in the habits of making requests. So a lot of the times the difference between request and a demand, going away from making demands and making more requests, and then the difference between request and demand is how will you respond if somebody doesn't follow your request, and actually letting them, because that's what it means, right? It's a request, they have choice, they can choose not to do that, right? And again, in the team context, it can be different. Certain things need to be done, but like trying to make less demand, because if you make a demand and even they do it, usually in these situations you will actually pay for it. So those are some of the takeaways for me. But let's change gear, Meghann, and let's just talk about motivation. So we are living in COVID times where things are pretty crazy, and we have different things going on. We're handling family, working remotely, other things that we might be dealing with, and then that's the same thing with the team members, right? So what are some ways that what are some things that you've done to keep the team morale high, and some ways to transition into this remote world as a Scrum Master for the team?
Yeah, that has definitely been a hot topic in our teams, is motivation. People, and I've gotten into this habit before as well, of just waking up 5 minutes before I gotta be on my stand-up, joining, and then wondering why the heck I feel sluggish the rest of the day and why I don't want to do my work.
Yes.
And it's because I didn't take care of myself.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's one thing that I really work to do, is empower my teammates to self-care hard. Yeah. I'm the kind of professional who is also personal, and we talk about it, and we say, we'll bring up, like, they don't have to share these personal things with me on what's going on in their life, but at least letting them know that I'm thinking of them in that way, for them to like sit and meditate on like what's going on in your relationships at home right now, like. And doing some analysis of maybe why they're not feeling motivated. Is it because there's something crappy going on in a relationship? Is it because, they haven't gone out into the sunlight in a week? Is it, Is it because they're not taking breaks? Is it because they're not drinking water?
Yeah.
I mean, there's such a holistic perspective that I take on motivation, because it ultimately comes down to habits. It's what are you filling your life up with, and is it serving you? And if it's not serving you, then why are you doing it?
Yes. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. So good. Meghann, another question is, what are some of the attributes that makes a great Scrum Master?
Well, I could be biased here and just talk about myself. Just kidding. You know, as I've worked with other Scrum Masters, as I've coached other Scrum Masters, some of the biggest attributes that really stand out to me is a willingness to learn. A willingness to actually say that, hey, I don't know what the answer is. But I'm willing to figure it out. Is one of the biggest pieces. I think also not being so egotistical. Like, I think there's definitely good ego, and there's also maybe not so good ego where, you know, people are so huff and puffed in their chest of, it has to be my way or the highway. That is detrimental. To the team when you bring that kind of personality to the table. So I say the more that you can be focused on others, putting others' needs first, and that's really challenging for a lot of people. It's challenging for myself at times as well. But for myself, knowing that if I give to this team, that they'll be able to give back to me. You know, it's karma. Is super important.
Meghann, so as a Scrum Master working in a large enterprise, you actually have other Scrum Master. How have you taken advantage of like the collective knowledge and experience of other Scrum Masters? We get together once a week. Nice.
Every Wednesday, which I actually think we're moving to Fridays, is an opportunity for us to get together and talk through not only what's happening within our teams, if there's anything that you know, might occurred that we're not really sure on how to solve or how to approach, you know, having that opportunity to talk to each other about that, but then also doing a hybrid with doing a scrum of scrums while we're with each other, just really making the most out of the 30 minutes that we've got with each other.
Nice. That's amazing. And then last question is, Meghann, so you're an amazing Scrum Master. I'm pretty sure you get involved in interviewing and bringing on other Scrum Masters. This is our audience. They're trying to
I see you.
They're trying to become a great Scrum Master, right? So like, what are you looking for whenever you're interviewing somebody, or if you were to bring on another Scrum Master part of in your company, what are you looking for in a new aspiring Scrum Master?
You know, I helped bring on one of our recent Scrum Masters. I believe it's been probably a year now since she just joined us. And some of the main reasons why I promoted her after that interview to be on the team was because she was confident in all of her answers. She knew what she was talking about, and even if she didn't, she made it sound like she did. Yes, I respect that so much. The other thing is, though, a willingness to share that they're not perfect. You know, handful of questions, whether it's one question or two questions, if you don't know the answer to it, I expect you to let me know, or at least ask a follow-up question to gain some more understanding. You know, someone who really has that growth mindset, that's willing to put it all on the line and say, hey, here's who I am, here's what I'm about, here's my values, and actually showcasing that within the interview process. You know, you can have all of the amazing technical attributes of a Scrum Master, of knowing, you know, what an amazing story looks like with the 3 C's and invest and, you know, all these great things, and, you know, being able to know all of the different, you know, ways of analyzing how the team is doing, and that's phenomenal. Those are things that I continue to grow in. But if your communication skills suck, then probably gonna have to go interview at a different company.
Sure. You value like communication skills, or somebody who's actually trying and making a point to like improve their communication.
Exactly.
Yeah. So great, Meghann. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much. I learned a lot in this conversation. So I'm sure a lot of people will really appreciate hearing your point of view. With that, we'll do a wrap. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. We'll be sure to come back with more exciting videos on Agile topics.